Hello, my name is Jordan Steffen, and today I'm going to be doing a presentation on the ethics of prenatal screening and selective abortion. Just a little bit of background information. I chose this topic because I honestly just found it super interesting, and I didn't really know much about the ethics or moral issues surrounding this topic. But as a woman myself, I just thought it would be an interesting topic of study, and that's why I chose it. So first off, I would like to just give some history about prenatal testing and selective abortions. So in the 1950s, the first prenatal screenings did begin. Following shortly after, in 1956, was the first ultrasound machine that was used in Glasgow. This obviously sparked a whole new revolution of prenatal screening. In 1973, Roe versus Wade was passed in the United States, and this basically gave the right to a woman having an abortion, the right to having an abortion without any government interference. In 1975, the first documented sex-selected abortion was made. So some motivations for the use of prenatal testing and selective abortions are mainly to protect children from a compromised life. That is one of the main arguments that surround this topic. Following along these lines, preventing against mental retardation such as Down syndrome, preventing genetic diseases such as early onset Alzheimer's, and protecting child from disabilities such as deafness are some of the main reasons why prenatal testing and selective abortions are in use. So some of the moral implications around this topic. One, abortion in most societies is seen as a very broad concept, and all different parts of abortions have been kind of sorted together into one. This just brings issues with how a lot of people view abortion, when in reality there's a lot of reasons that people do get abortions, such as sex-selective abortions, such as disease/disorder selective abortions, and such as selective reduction abortions. Number two, kind of following along with that, a lot of people view abortion in a negative way because of kind of how abortion has been broadened into one big group. So people view some abortions or selected abortions as better or more accepted than others, such as things like if your child has an impairment or a genetic disability that you can see in the fetus, that is a more accepted abortion practice rather than if you choose to abort your baby based on their sex. For three, all disabilities/genetic abnormalities are bad or seen as bad. This causes issues around that as well. And four, this topic shows the cultural differences in beliefs around sex-selective abortions, abortions in general, prenatal screening, and just how different cultures, not just in America, but in the entire world, view this topic. So the first article I wanted to talk about was Genetic Selective Abortion, Still a Matter of Choice by Bruce Blackshaw. He mainly talks about how a woman should have the right to an equal abortion. So basically, he brings up the fact that some abortions are viewed as being better or just more accepted than others. In this case, he was talking about how fetal impairment ramifications. So if the baby is seen to have like a genetic abnormality or something in the womb, it's more acceptable to abort that baby over someone who's aborting their child because of their sex. And he basically just gives a list of reasons why this shouldn't matter and why all abortions should be equal for the woman to have the right to choose what to do with her body. I also found this quote by Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I thought it was super interesting. She says, "The decision whether or not to bear a child is central to a woman's life, to her well-being and dignity. It is a decision she must make for herself." I just thought this was a super powerful and relatable quote. In this case, I do stand for women having full rights over her own body, and abortion is something that should be up to the woman, not to anybody else. So I thought this was an awesome quote. Another article I found was by Abby Lippman called "Prenatal Genetic Testing and Screening, Constructing Needs and Reinforcing Inequities." So she lists reasonings behind getting genetics testing and screening done. She lists kind of the same reasons I listed before, just to check if the child has predisposed disabilities, to make sure that the child has a better life, and to avoid any illnesses or abnormalities during the pregnancy. The main thing, although she does talk about, is how many disabilities are viewed very negatively by society, and she kind of emphasizes the fact that society has constructed this negative stigma around disabilities so that it kind of makes aborting someone with disabilities more acceptable, and she thinks this is totally wrong, and she kind of just shows a negative perspective on the issue of disabilities and aborting children with disabilities. Again, I go on to say how Abby Lippman's case on prenatal genetic testing relates to the issue of selective abortions and what conclusions does it draw. So Lippman describes the issues surrounding the concept of prenatal genetic testing and how these tests have given rise to the selective abortion rates. She shares the negative sides of the perspective on prenatal screening and the ethical problems it evokes around the ideas that disabilities are negative and should be gotten rid of. This was just an interesting light that I haven't really thought of before. A lot of society does view disabilities and just any abnormality as something bad, and Abby Lippman just kind of shows the other side of that. Kind of going along with Lippman's article, Rich Wordsworth wrote an article why some parents choose to have a deaf baby. In this article, he talks about a couple who specifically chose to have a deaf baby, which is kind of the opposite of what selective abortions are meant to do. Generally, selective abortions and prenatal screening is used to detect things like deafness, any disabilities, and then therefore abort the baby so that they do not have to live a life with deafness. In this article, however, he kind of shows a different perspective on deafness. The parents in the article are deaf themselves, and they see it as a total blessing in their life, and they want their child to live the same way that they did. And so they use pre-implantation genetic diagnosis in order to kind of create and manipulate their pregnancy to have a child that is deaf. Which again just shows like the ethical dilemma of how certain disabilities and abnormalities are viewed, and just there's so many different perspectives on the topic. On the other hand, I wanted to show a little bit of how different countries view abortions / prenatal screening. So I found this article by Jim Yardley called "As Wealth and Literacy Rise in India, Reports Say So Do Sex-Selective Abortions." This article mainly talks about kind of what the title implies, but how India is predominantly a male culture, and so they use sex-selective abortions to specifically abort female fetuses. And this has decreased their female population tremendously over the years. This quote says, "The new study estimated that 4 million to 12 million selective abortions of girls have occurred in India in the past 3 decades," which was just kind of an astounding statistic. Obviously, in America, it's lesser known for sex-selective abortions to be like purely based on if the fetus is female. So it's just kind of an interesting cultural perspective to see how India views, male versus female fetuses. It also says how wealthier families in India have adopted their own money and resources to kind of advance the technologies behind sex-selective abortions. So how do these articles apply to this class? First off, I just want to say how the articles show the huge discrepancies in and within prenatal testing and selective abortions. They emphasize how there's both positive and negative perspectives on this issue, and how there's just many different ethical dilemmas as well. They help mainly to connect to this class because it involves women. Women are the number one step in pregnancy. They are the person to take on pregnancy and to bear the child, and it's their body that has to go through any distress that comes with that. So this definitely brings up the moral dilemmas that we've learned in class, and that tied to how a woman should have a right to their own bodies and should have a say in what they do with their bodies. So what do they say about us? These articles bring to light that our community is very disconnected and opinionated about what others choose to do with their bodies. Again, it shows very blatantly that society still does not accept the fact that women should have control over their choices and their bodies, and that there's still a very, very big fight for winning those rights completely. It also shows how the medical community seemingly is pro-selective abortion and prenatal testing and continues to advance this technology to help women in this process. So some special reminders. Every woman should have a personal right to their own bodies and choices. That is the conclusion I've come to after doing research on this topic. Along with this, prenatal screening and selective abortions are always going to have two sides to the argument. I've learned throughout this process that there are definitely many different arguments and perspectives to see within this idea or concepts. So there's definitely going to be two sides to every argument. And lastly, just to understand your research and the science behind the things that you have opinions about. This definitely changed my perspective on abortions, sex-selective abortions, prenatal testing. I've always had a strong belief that women should do whatever they want with their bodies, but just doing this research has opened my eyes to so much more about this field. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And here is my works cited. Again, thank you.